Tournaments have concluded in Pokemon TCG Pocket for Shining Revelry, and we got a first glimpse of what the best decks will be for this upcoming month and this first rank season, so let's take a look. Yeah, remember it's still early, we are still in the first week of Shining Revelry, but for now, this Gyarados decklist here is the most successful deck in the game with the highest win rate. Why is Gyarados back on top of the meta after it fell off, and why did it fell off in the first place? So, with Mythical Island releasing, Gyarados was one of, if not the #1 best deck in the game. But as soon as Space-Time Smackdown came around, that stopped being the case. So why is that? That is because of Space-Time Smackdown introducing us to Giant Cape. That meant that basic Pokemon, basic EX Pokemon, like for example a Darkrai, do not get one-shot by that Gyarados anymore, because Darkrai now, instead of having 140 HP with a Giant Cape on it, it has now 160 HP. So Gyarados is, as a stage 1 with a heavy energy attachment need, out of one-hit KO range. Even with a Giovanni, he is still 10 damage off, so that is pretty underwhelming, and that's why Gyarados fell off. Not into complete irrelevancy, but yeah, it wasn't on top of the meta anymore either. How did Shining Revelry change that? That is very easy. It gave us the new trainer supporter card, Red. That means that now Gyarados is in KO range. Gyarados now hits the 160. And that's simply the reason why he is back in full force, and he's an absolute raid boss. For stage 1 with 180 HP to now KO most things in the game is, yeah, devastating, right? And that's why he's like one of, if not the #1 best deck in the game currently. It's the most successful deck right now, that's a fact. So yeah, the introduction of Giant Cape hurt it, but now that we have Red, which completely negates the Giant Cape, he's back to where he was. And not only did he get Red, while Gyarados was waiting for Red to release, he got further support with the introduction of Irida, which is the second best healing trainer supporter card in the entire game. And yeah, again, having that on a stage 1 with 180 HP is completely nuts. Furthermore, he also got the mana fee now, and Origin Form Palkia rose in popularity, so he doesn't really rely on that Greninja anymore, right? He needed Greninja in the past to do this additional 20 damage to negate that Giant Cape. That is now no longer the case. We don't need a stage 2 together with Gyarados anymore. We now simply have a trainer card, and that's it. That makes this deck much better, much more consistent, and yeah, he's now back to be one of the best decks, if not even the #1 best deck in the game. This is the deck list that you would play him with. There is just one thing you could change if you wanted to, and that is remove one Rocky Helmet and add a second Red. Maybe you even remove the second Rocky Helmet and add a Giant Cape. I would not recommend you doing that. It's not really necessary for this deck. But yeah, removing one Rocky Helmet and adding a second Red, that is something that you should seriously consider, and that I would recommend you even do. That's all the wiggle room there is to. Everything else here is a 100% staple. And that's all about this Gyarados decklist. So now let's move on to our second entrance, which is Giratina Mewtwo. Now yeah, Giratina, that is no surprise that it shows up. Just as, what do you pair Giratina with? Exactly, that was the big question. There is the option of Magnezone, there is the option to pair it with Darkrai, and we have Greninja and Magnezone. So there were a few options you could pair Giratina with, and this question is now answered. You simply slap one Mewtwo EX and pair that one with Giratina, and that's about that. So yeah, what this deck does is, it is pretty versatile. You can either start off with Giratina EX or with Mewtwo EX, because you can then set up either on the bench. So yeah, let me explain this further. Let's say we start off and we use the Mewtwo EX as our wall, as our tank, to then be able to safely set up our Giratina EX on the bench. This is like the main way to play this deck. This is like the idea behind it. So what you can do is, again, you are very versatile, you have multiple options here. You can adapt to the situation and see how much damage and how fast would your opponent deal to you, and how fast would that damage hit. And depending on what the answer here is, you can either set up that Mewtwo in the active, right, your energy attachment, go to Mewtwo. Now, let's say that's first turn, you attach an energy to Mewtwo. You can't do anything, so instead of pressing the end turn button, you use Giratina EX's ability to end your turn, which attaches a psychic energy to that Giratina. So instead of having one attachment per turn, you now have two, right? And pretty much for free, because there wouldn't be anything else you could do anyways. So now you have one energy attached to both of your Pokemon. You can now attach a second energy to the Mewtwo and then decide, right? Either decide between three things. Either you deal the 50 damage, or you use Giratina EX's ability one more time to generate a second energy to that Giratina, or you play the Dawn right now. You know, Dawn makes it so that you can move the energy from Giratina that you generated for free to the Mewtwo EX to then gain the tempo advantage +1, right? Now Mewtwo EX is ready one turn earlier than he would normally be, so that's pretty big. And those are your options, right? You see, it's very, very versatile. Another thing you could also do is you could only use this Mewtwo EX as a wall and never attach any energy to it, right? So yeah, on your first turn you attach an energy to Giratina, uses ability. Next turn you attach an energy to Giratina and uses ability again. Then it's ready. So on your third turn you can now play the leaf to retreat the Mewtwo and bring in a full HP Giratina EX fully set up and deal 130 damage every single turn to your opponent from now on, right? That is pretty fast, and that hits like a truck. Again, now Giratina quote unquote only deals 130 damage. That, as we talked about earlier with Gyarados, wouldn't get the KO on even like basic EX Pokemon if they have a giant cape attached to them, right? That is not too much of a big deal, because Giratina is also a basic and it won't get KO'd in return either. So that is not as big of a deal as it would be with something like, let's say, Gyarados, you know? But again, same thing here, red comes in and now you hit the 150. That KOs most Pokemon, right? I mean, yeah, the giant cape, you are still off by 10. That's a little bit of a bummer, but since you are so ridiculously fast, thanks to Giratina's ability, and you could even be more fast with setting up things with Dawn, you know? So while yeah, this will miss KOs here and there, it's still very, very good and one of the most successful decks currently, as it can get out of control because of how fast it can be. And it is very, very consistent and very versatile, because yeah, as I just told you, you have a lot of different variations and a lot of room to adapt to whatever your enemy, whatever your opponent brings to the table, right? So yeah, to play this to its maximum efficiency, it really depends on the player, and this deck needs a good pilot. The better the pilot is, the better this deck will become. Sure, that is true for every single deck, obviously, but here really the player can make this deck really shine or really fail this deck. So, yeah, because you have to adapt to whatever your opponent brings. So you have to be able to read the game and understand exactly what's happening, and if you are one of those players, this deck is extremely strong and one of the best decks you can currently play. And that's it for this Garantina Mewtwo EX deck list. So now let's move on to Gallade. Gallade is very successful currently, and yeah, the reason is kind of simple. If you look at Gallade EX first, then yeah, you will notice a few things. First of all, it can also be really quick because it only needs 2 energy attached. That is very good for a fighting type deck because it cannot accelerate energy. But more important is that the more energy is attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, the more damage Gallade will actually deal. And if you now remember the decks that I just showed you that are very successful, then yeah, let's go back and take a look. You see Gyarados needs 4 energy attached. You see even the origin from Palkia with only 120 HP needs 3 energy attached. You see Mewtwo needs 4 energy attached. You see Giratina needs 4 energy attached, right? And since those decks are the strongest decks currently, that makes Gallade deal a lot of damage, because yeah, you can do the math, right? You do 70 first of all, and then 20 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if your opponent now has 3 energy attached, you do 60 more damage. That would be 130. 1 more is 150, right? And again, Gyarados has 4, Mewtwo has 4, and Giratina has 4. That makes it so that you hit for 150. And you one-hit KO everything except the Gyarados, right? You one-shot the Mewtwo, you one-shot the Giratina, you one-shot the Palkia, and that's all you base. Then that's pretty much all you need. Also, Darkrai sees some play together with the Giratina as well, and guess what? Darkrai has at least 3 energy attached as well. Most of the times he has more energy attached to himself because he wants to keep using his ability every single turn. So the probability, the odds of you also one-shotting that Darkrai are not too shabby, and that's what makes Gallade a force to be reckoned with, right? And remember, there's more. Remember me saying that yeah, you one-shot everything except for the Gyarados. Now there is a huge caveat here with that, because Gyarados' stage 1 is Magikarp. Magikarp has 30 HP, and guess what Hitmonlee does? Hitmonlee hits for just 1 energy, hits a Pokemon on your opponent's bench for 30 damage. That means that the Magikarp is in a whole lot of danger here, because you could one-shot the Magikarp on the opponent's bench before it evolves, right? So this deck right here that counters the meta, so to speak, right? It really is the case, and that's why Gallade rose in popularity, and yeah, it became much better. Also, like with many other stuff, like the Gyarados for example, like you are often 10 or 20 damage off to actually one-shot stuff, right? And Giant Cape is still a thing. So again, the Mewtwo and the Giratina and maybe even the Darkrai, right? Let's stick with Mewtwo and Giratina. Both of them have 150 HP, which with a Giant Cape that would make it 170. Now they have 4 energy attached. That means your Gallade deals 150 damage. But you won't get the one-shot, because the Giratina and the Mewtwo, they both have 170 HP because of the Giant Cape. But you have Red. Boom. Now Red allows you to get the one-shot once again, because he completely negates the Giant Cape. And yeah, these things are the reasons that Gallade is also one of the best decks right now. It's elevated to a whole new level because of how the meta looks right now and how the energy attachment works. And yeah, red changes the game, right? So red changes the game for a lot of Pokemon because they couldn't get the one-shots because of this giant cape, but red negates it, and those are all the good reasons why Gallade is extremely strong and very successful in the current meta. So with the current best 3 decks out of the way, I want to show you an honorable mention. Of course, yeah, that one is more of a, so to speak, just for fun thing. But it could work, and if it does, it's actually nuts. So let me show you. This is a little bit coin flippy here. It's Dialga Golden Go. So what we have to look at first is what Golden Go actually does. It's not an EX Pokemon, but it is a stage 1. And you need 3 energy attached to him to begin with, right? So yeah, you already can see the downsides, but check him out. For 3 energy, he deals nothing, right? But you flip a coin for each metal type energy attached to him, and for each heads that you flip, you deal 50 damage. That means you will be in need to flip 3 heads to one-shot most of the meta game. And together with Dialga, who can accelerate this metal type energy to the Golden Go, this is inconsistent, and it has a lot of it. This is not meta. It's more of a just for fun thing, as I said. Like, keep that in mind, right? But this could actually turn out to be quite nuts. It's like a Zerabi but metal type, pretty much. And the Dialga is a very good energy accelerator for exactly what Golden Go does. Now also, another pretty cool thing here is that you don't even necessarily have a huge issue when you have to start with a Gimmighoul, because he can protect himself. For 1 energy, you flip a coin if heads. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage from and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon. So he would allow you to buy you the time to draw into that Dialga and to set the Dialga up and then generate, it can work as a mechanic to buy you time. So it's not a free KO or like 2 week as a starter necessarily. Again, you rely on coin flips, right? That is always a little bit inconsistent, and it could just do absolutely nothing. That is always the problem with flipping coins. But yeah, I still wanted to show you this deck because for players that like inconsistency and have a gambling nature, and love coin flipping, those players exist, trust me. They can have a lot of fun with this deck, potentially. So I just wanted to show this as a for fun thing here. But yeah, that's about the video. Remember, the 3 best decks in the game right now are Gallade, Gyarados, and Giratina Mewtwo. Those 3, with Gyarados being the most successful deck in the game currently, right? And since Gyarados is the most successful and Giratina is the second most successful deck in the game, and they have a huge energy attachment need, that's why Gallade shows up and takes the spot number 3 as the 3rd most successful deck in the game, as it is not necessarily a counter to Gyarados and Giratina, but it is a force to be reckoned with, and it can really hurt these decks. But then again, you are a stage 2 and you have to draw into Gallade fast, and that will not always be the case, but you get the point here, right? If it works, it counters the meta hard, and that's why it's here at number 3. Tournament success proves it. For now, remember we are still in week 1, things might change up a little bit here and there, right? But for now, that is the meta game. And then we have a just for fun thing thrown into here as well. So that's it for the video. I hope that was fun and informative. If you like Pokemon TCG Pocket content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care of yourselves, have a great day, and bye bye.